My path between destiny and conscience. We do not always choose the path, but how we walk it defines us. Vlad Christian, this book is an inner journey, an exploration of destiny, conscience, childhood, love, time, and spirit. It is a true story about choices, about people, about life, told with sincerity and lucidity. Within its pages, the reader will find not only the life of one man, but perhaps a part of their own searching. Vlad Christian. Letter to my son's son. If you ever come to read these lines, it means you are old enough to seek meanings. Perhaps you will not find your father in all the pages of this book, but I hope you will find a part of yourself, from your questions, from your doubts, and from the dreams you did not dare to speak. I wrote this book not to build myself a statue, but to leave traces. Traces of a path not easy, but full of meaning. Traces of inner battles, of people who shaped me, of women who lifted me and sometimes broke me, and especially traces of love, of my love for you, which was not always expressed in words, but which accompanied me in every step. You too will have paths to take, mountains to climb, and shadows to cross. But I hope that when it gets hard, you will remember that you were born from a soul that sought light even in darkness. That you were raised by a father who, although imperfect, loved deeply, and hoped to leave behind something more valuable than any wealth, his truth. If life is a journey, then you are my most beautiful direction. I love you. Your father, Christian Vlad. My path between destiny and conscience. Dedicated to my son Vlad Petru Alexandru, with the thought that reality is not limited to what the eyes can see. Try to see with your heart, because limits are only in our minds, and self-belief helps us overcome them. Life is a complex journey, woven from the threads of personal and collective history, shrouded in the unfathomable mysteries of existence, and explored through psychological introspection and philosophical reflection. Between destiny and conscience, each step is a choice, each moment a revelation, and between dream and reality, past and future, lessons that shape us and questions that guide us take form. This is my story, a path strewn with memories that carry echoes of time, discoveries that open doors to deeper understandings, and reflection upon the material and spiritual world, upon my own inner existence. It will be an exploration of the mysteries that surround us and those within the depths of the soul, an adventure through the labyrinth of the human psyche, a philosophical search for meaning and truth. I will confront fundamental questions that have troubled humanity for centuries. Who am I in this historical whirlwind? What mission falls to me in this realm of existence? How do the forces of destiny intertwine with the freedom of existence? These searches, along with a fascination for the past and a desire to understand inner mechanisms, will shape this story. Chapter 1: Roots and Memories. I was born on a summer morning, June 23, 1978, in Bucharest. The sun was just rising over the city, and life pulsed through the crowded streets of the capital. I came into the world in a peculiar place, at Hospital Number 9, now known as a psychiatric hospital, a detail I've always found ironic. Perhaps destiny gave me a sign from the very beginning, a warning that my life would be sprinkled with introspection and inner searches. My parents, Ion and Marilena, were simple people, but with big hearts. Father had a gentle yet determined nature, a man who understood life through work and sacrifice. He was hardworking and responsible, dedicated to his family. With a practical spirit and a more reserved nature, he offered us stability and security. I remember the seriousness with which he carried out his tasks and the silent care he had for us. Mother, on the other hand, was the heart of the home, a strong woman with sharp intuition, always able to read people at a glance. She was a force of nature, full of energy and boundless kindness. With her remarkable intuition, she sensed the nuances of our moods and offered us exactly what we needed, whether it was a wise word, a warm embrace, or an encouraging burst of optimism. She was the one who held the family together and inspired us with her strength and affection. They were and still are for me an example of unconditional love and constant support, creating for us a home full of safety and affection. The family house in Bucharest, an old house bought by my grandfather Petre for my parents, still brings me a strange, almost fearful feeling when I think about it. Sometimes, in my memories, it seems shrouded in a mysterious atmosphere, as if it were haunted. I still remember the long nights when the silence was broken by inexplicable noises, creaking in the floorboards, or whispers carried by the wind. And even more intense was the image, perhaps a product of my childhood imagination, of a vague silhouette standing at the head of my bed, as if watching over me in the dark. It was a silent, unsettling presence that fueled a constant feeling of unease in that house. I grew up alongside two brothers. Marion, the older brother, born in November 1975, an example of determination and courage. I remember a summer in Stonetty when we were younger and playing on a steep bank of the Kalnitia River. I slipped and was about to fall into the water. Without hesitation, Marion grabbed my hand with surprising strength and pulled me back, even though he was also in danger. That quickness and his fearlessness in reacting to help me have always characterized him. And Petre Trajan, Pepe, the youngest of the family, born in October 1985, whom we all affectionately nicknamed. I still remember the special day when Pepe came home from the maternity ward. I was eager to see him. Mother brought him home wrapped in a soft blanket. When I looked inside and saw that fragile and tiny little person with his eyes closed, I felt a wave of affection and an instinctive desire to protect him. Father smiled and said gently, "See, now you have a little brother to take care of." From that moment on, a gentle responsibility settled on my young shoulders. I knew, without anyone telling me, that I had to protect my younger brother, Pepe, the 7-year age difference between us creating a special bond. The first echoes of my childhood take me to the village of Stonetty, to my grandparents Petre and Stanka, a picturesque place where time seemed to flow slower to the rhythm of nature. I spent a good part of my early years there, in my grandparents' house. Their house, with its shady porch and garden full of flowers, was a universe in itself, a place of safety and endless stories. I remember those beautiful summers when we went to our grandparents for summer vacations. Pepe was still small, and Marion and I did what we could, helping with the field work. At that time, grandfather Petre had sheep, and Marion would take them to pasture. I had been given a calf to look after. I would take it daily almost to the Kalnitia River, tether it there, and spend the rest of the day swimming in the flowing water. Later, I remember a time when I also went with the sheep, now at the sheepfold, far from home. I stayed there for a whole week, sleeping in a small, makeshift hut that protected us from rain and wind. The sheep were enclosed in a pen overnight. Those nights remained vivid in my memory, clear, full of stars, with crickets singing in the background and a cosmic silence that made me feel part of the universe. One morning, a frightening cloud appeared in the distance. The wind began to blow harder and harder, and within minutes, the cloud surrounded us. A dense, sharp fog covered everything. I was a child, alone in the middle of the wilderness, and the sheep were grazing nearby. A moment of terror followed. A huge wind, almost like a hurricane, stirred up, and hail fell heavily. I got scared. I sat down, with my blanket pulled over my head, and waited in silence for it all to pass. I was soaking wet, trembling, and repeating in my mind, "It will pass, it will pass." When the storm subsided, I took the blanket off. The field was white with ice, and the sheep had disappeared. In the distance, I saw grandfather Petre coming with the cart at a gallop. He had been alerted and had come for me. When he arrived, I felt a peace in my soul. He took me home, and in my place, he left someone else to continue. It was the first time I had encountered the fury of nature, but also one of the first times I felt what it meant to be protected. Also in those summers spent at my grandparents', time seemed to stretch out, and each day brought a new adventure. I remember going fishing with Marion on the river, hoping to catch the biggest fish with our rudimentary fishing rods, which we prepared ourselves from the most resistant reeds. It was an art in itself, to choose the right reed, to clean it, to strengthen it, and to tie it with gut, transforming it into a tool of patience and hope. We would spend hours on the riverbank, our eyes fixed on the float, dreaming of the perfect catch. When we weren't fishing, we played football in the field with the other children from the village. I still remember a memorable match. We had formed teams, and I, being the youngest, was assigned the role of goalkeeper. Chapter 2, Between Life and the Unseen. I remember the intensity of that afternoon perfectly. The game completely absorbed us, a boundless youthful energy spent in running and shouting. In that split second, in the heat of defending the goal, I threw myself unreservedly towards the ball, a fragile David facing amateur Goliaths. The difference in stature, in brute force, disappeared from my calculation. My only intention was to prove, perhaps more to myself than to them, that smallness does not mean helplessness, that heart and courage can compensate for missing inches. The impact was brutal, unexpected. The weight of the two older boys crashed down on me, a dull but powerful blow, dangerously concentrated in the head area. Then, there was silence. Not a silence of the absence of sound, but an inner one, as if the volume of the world had suddenly been turned down to a minimum. The distant sounds of the game receded into a faint echo. The vivid colors of the grass and sky began to lose their contours, transforming into imprecise, pastel shades. Time itself disintegrated, each second dilating into a fluid eternity, like in a slow dream. But it wasn't sleep. It wasn't a dream. It was another state, an unknown territory situated somewhere on the border between physical perception and its absence. I was floating. I had no body, or at least I didn't feel it. Thoughts scattered like clouds carried by the wind, leaving behind a soothing emptiness. There was no fear, just a calm suspension, a liberation of consciousness from the constraints of matter. For a few infinite minutes, I was no longer the child lying on the ground, the victim of a game played too seriously, but a pure presence, a point of consciousness suspended between two planes of existence. In that white nothingness, devoid of edges or landmarks, I perceived a different energy. It was not electricity, nor physical warmth, but a subtle vibration, a silent call that pulsed in that void. And, paradoxically, I recognized it. It was a warm, enveloping presence, without a defined shape, but with a strange familiarity. Perhaps it was a hidden part of myself, an unseen core. Or perhaps, in that moment of extreme vulnerability, I had touched an edge of divinity, a fragment of something larger than myself. Then, for a fraction of eternity, I felt that I knew, not through the words that form in the mind, nor through the images that parade on the screen of consciousness, but through a direct, visceral understanding. It was as if all the questions that my child's mind was just beginning to formulate about life and death, about the flow of time and the invisible threads of destiny, had found an answer beyond any logic. But that answer was fragile, ethereal, impossible to bring back into the world of words. It remained there, in that mysterious silence, like a melody heard in a dream and forgotten upon waking, but whose subtle echo persists. Then, little by little, everything began to return. First, a vague sensation of pressure on my shoulder, Marion. His voice, initially like a distant murmur, became clearer, uttering words of concern. Another presence, another child, was supporting me from the other side, helping me to get up. I was moving, but I wasn't fully present. A part of me remained anchored in that other world, in that profound silence. Fragmented memories of that state mixed with physical sensations, the roughness of the grass under my hands, the blinding light of the sun, the rustling of footsteps on the ground. When we reached the stream, the cold water splashed on my face was like a gentle but effective blow that forcefully brought me back to reality. But something had changed. Something remained with me, like an inner vibration, a subtle echo of that silence. A memory beyond memory, a vague feeling that I had seen something important, that I had touched a fundamental truth that cannot be expressed in words. Perhaps it was there, in that white void, that my first conscious question about death was born, about what lies beyond the visible boundary of existence. Perhaps it was then that I understood, intuitively, that life is more than a simple succession of days, that there is a profound mystery that envelops it. Those few minutes suspended between worlds remained in my soul like a silent gateway, a subtle crack in the fabric of reality. Perhaps, in that fragile moment, I felt for the first time, without fully understanding, that I had a path. Not one clearly defined, visible, but an inner one, which sends its signs through inexplicable silences, through strange dreams, through vague premonitions. And perhaps that's why, since then, I have always sought that feeling of beyond, in the deep gazes of people, trying to decipher the mystery behind their eyes. In the imposing silence of the mountain, aspiring to that sensation of vastness and transcendence. In the endless mysteries of the starry sky, contemplating the infinite. In the unanswered questions, letting myself be drawn to the enigmas of existence. Thank you for watching the first part of my path between destiny and consciousness. To continue this journey, find the full book link in the description below.